In this video, we examine ways to quantify measurements of civilization that take various factors like energy, social complexity, and information technology into account. These include the social development measure by Morris and the energy scale by Kardashev. Such measures are possible and useful. However, they are value neutral and fail to get at the really interesting aspects of civilization that requires to think about morality. Ian Morris provides a quantitative way of measuring civilizations. He calls it social development, defined as a society's ability to master their physical and intellectual environment in order to get things done. In other words, it is the ability to feed, clothe, house its citizens, explain the world around them, and resolve disputes. He takes pains to say that this definition is value neutral. In other words, it does not have anything to say about a society's moral or environmental development. Many prior scholars have defined civilization in terms of development through different stages. For example, Herbert Spencer argued that human societies evolved from simple groups of hunter-gatherers, shown here, through compound villages with established leaders. After this came the doubly compound stage of organized religion, states, division of labor, and scholarship to the final stages of great civilizations. Each of these stages is characterized by an increased amount of differentiation and complexity. Other theorists since then have echoed similar ideas in which increasing degrees of social stratification occur with the development of things like political systems and economic markets, or specialization of production and number of subgroups. Many of these researchers formulated quantitative measures of these criteria that for the most part are in concordance. Morris's measure starts at 14,000 BCE and runs to 2000 CE, sampling at increasingly short intervals as the rate of progress increases. It consists of 4 traits. These are, number 1, energy capture per person, which is the amount of energy a person burns through in a day for things like food, fuel, powering of machines, etc. Number 2 is social organization, estimated as the population size of the largest permanent settlement. Large cities can serve as proxies for social complexity. Number 3 is information technology, measured as the ability to store and transmit information based on people's intelligence, as well as in machine systems. And number 4 is war-making capacity. This is a measure of how well a given society can compete against rivals. It was calculated as the destructive power of the weapons it can bring to bear. Calculation using these metrics show that Western development has been higher than Eastern development for 93% of the time since the end of the Ice Age. However, projecting the rise forward across the next century suggests that the East may surpass the West. There's also a clear progression from foraging to farming to factory work, and ceiling to how high development could go under each stage. Furthermore, no culture was capable of skipping a stage on its own unless it was conquered by another culture at that stage. Cultures in similar biomes evolved along similar trajectories, implying a strong influence of geography. As social development increased for societies in favorable latitudes, they grew and took over new territory, suggesting that expansion is driven by increases in population numbers and complexity. What do these measures suggest for the future? Well, we see that development in general is increasing exponentially. We are already up against the hard ceiling of industrial development, so a transition to a new stage now seems imminent. If we fail to transition to such a stage, we may enter a period of stagnation. Morris concludes by saying that the next 50 years may be the most important in history and that we will know which way the world is headed by the 2060s. Morris himself anticipates several of the possible critiques against his approach. I will mention some of these now, along with my own commentary. The first is that using a quantitative measure is dehumanizing because it reduces people to numbers. Well, actually, the use of numbers is a perfectly acceptable way to measure things and is the hallmark of the scientific approach. So more of these types of measures should be developed and validated. In a way, numbers are actually humanizing because they are blind with respect to the cultures and the peoples being measured. A second critique is that quantifying is okay, but that social development is the wrong thing to measure. If one defines civilization in terms of human values, like freedom, individuality, and happiness, then these are clearly missing from the social development approach. Let me illustrate with an example. Let us take two cultures, one totalitarian, the other democratic. The totalitarian regime could, through the use of advanced AI, maximize scores on all four measures, but at the expense of human values. It could do so by monitoring and controlling every aspect of its citizenry. These people might be miserable, abject slaves. Would we then call this civilization better? This argument shows that any discussion of civilization cannot be divorced from values or human rights. A third critique is that social development is useful, but the above-mentioned traits are not the right ones. One issue with information technology is that it doesn't seem to adequately account for the quality of information. For example, the number of discoveries and inventions in a society are important, but not all inventions are equal. Discovery of a new theory that revolutionizes physics, or products such as the computer, have transformed societies in ways that are more revolutionary than incremental. They also reflect things like creativity and novelty that seem, in these kinds of metrics, to be only indirectly measured. Intelligence is often defined as the ability to adapt to new circumstances. This is true both at the individual and the societal level. It would be interesting to develop a metric that could capture how adaptable cultures are. Those that are flexible and able to deal with change better would score higher. This leads to the interesting idea that we could develop a civilizational IQ. War is certainly a constant in human history, but to focus exclusively on this as one of the four measures seems misguided. Success at war is closely linked to economic productive capacity. So an economic metric here would be more general and of greater utility. Human societies are characterized by competition as well as cooperation, so war seems to put too much emphasis on the competition part. Perhaps a new metric could be devised that would take both into account. We would be remiss if we did not mention that another metric of a civilization's progress has also been developed. This one by the Russian scientist Nikolai Kardashev back in 1964. The Kardashev scale is based on the amount of energy that a civilization uses and can predict what the development of civilizations much more advanced than our own might be like.
The scale has had a few additions proposed since the 1960s, beyond the somewhat limited 3 originally defined by Kardashev. These new levels are Type 0, 4, and 5. A Type 0 civilization as you might expect, is a civilization that has not yet been able to harness the energy of its home planet fully. As a result, it is a sub-global one that derives energy from raw materials. They haven't yet developed the ability to leave their home planet, but they're steadily getting there. Today, humans fall into this type of civilization since we still sustain our energy needs from dead plants and animals. Some scientists estimate that we are only 100 to 200 years away from graduating to Type 1. Kardashev defines Type 1 civilization as one that is still limited to a single planet, but most importantly, the civilization must be able to utilize all the energy of its home planet available at this level on the scale. Nuclear fusion is presumably child's play for this type of civilization, as well as harnessing antimatter. It utilizes all the energy that reaches the planet, like solar, and other power sources like geothermal and renewables would be expected. Type 2 civilizations are civilizations that have successfully harnessed the total energy of their local sun. One way to harness all the energy of their local sun is to build a megastructure known as a Dyson sphere around it. These hypothetical devices would completely enclose a star, collect all of its energy, and be able to transfer the energy for use by the home planet. This would require a high level of technological expertise, to say the least. Comprehensively, the Dyson sphere has become a staple in the search for extraterrestrial life. If you can spot a Dyson sphere out in space, aliens should not be far behind. They would also have colonized several planets in their local solar system. Extinction is a distant fantasy for them. A Type 3 civilization would be able to harness energy across a large number of star systems and planets, typically on a galactic scale. The magnitude of their technological capabilities would be beyond our current comprehension and probably imagination. According to some estimates, its energy is roughly 10 billion times the energy production of a Type 2 civilization. The beings in this civilization would use Dyson spheres regularly, and they could even be able to tap into the energy of black holes. If you think a galaxy-spanning civilization isn't magnificent enough, wait until you see a Type 4. Type 4 civilization would be able to harness energy across the entire universe. Nowadays, this might sound hilarious. A Type 5 civilization can do the same thing in a multiverse by drawing energy from multiple universes. Absurd, maybe, but it is possible in the far future.
In conclusion, the idea of measuring civilization quantitatively is a good one, and we should continue to try to attempt it. However, any such metric must take morality into account. In other videos, we have argued that concepts like truth, freedom, and individual rights are a necessary part of this discussion. Traits that we see in individuals can also occur in societies. These include things like intelligence, creativity, and adaptability. Civilization should not be measured without taking these features into account as well. Thanks for joining us. You can find other videos on this topic in our civilization playlist. If you're interested in how we define the term, or how scholars in the 19th century viewed civilization, then be sure to check these out.